It was a rainy morning in Cupertino, 1996. Outside Apple's headquarters, the world was quiet, but inside, a storm was brewing. Tension hung thick in the air, a fog of uncertainty. Executives stared at reports that screamed failure, mounting losses, dying product lines, and a loyal customer base that was slipping away. This was Apple, the pioneer, the symbol of innovation. But now, it felt like a relic, struggling to stay afloat in a market completely dominated by Microsoft. Their computers sat on store shelves, gathering dust, while sleek, affordable machines from competitors flew off the shelves, captivating consumers worldwide. In the hallways, employees whispered, wondering if the company would even survive another year. In the boardroom, it was even worse. Charts showed sales numbers plummeting, each downward tick a silent countdown to potential bankruptcy. The atmosphere was grim. Every meeting felt like a battle between a flicker of hope and overwhelming despair. And in the middle of this chaos, a few leaders started talking about a gamble. A gamble so bold, so reckless, that most would call it corporate suicide. But what no one knew was that a single choice, made in the coming days, would decide Apple's fate. Michael Spindler, Apple's CEO at the time, was under unimaginable pressure. The board, the investors, everyone was looking to him for a miracle. But every suggestion he made was met with skepticism or just outright dismissed. The company had launched dozens of products, each one promising to be the next big thing, but none of them had stuck. Employees were burning out, working long hours, desperately trying to create something, anything, that could turn the tide. Of course, the ghost of Steve Jobs loomed over everything. The co-founder had been pushed out years earlier, leaving a massive void in vision and leadership. Rumors swirled that he might return, but for now, Apple needed a savior inside the boardroom. Everyone knew that one wrong move could be the end. They debated every option, cutting product lines, selling off parts of the company, anything to stop the bleeding. But each idea felt like putting a bandage on a gaping wound. The tension in the room was a living, breathing thing. Apple's product roadmap was a complete mess. They had multiple operating systems in development, overlapping hardware projects, and engineers working against each other without realizing it. Their retail strategy was non-existent, and their marketing campaigns were falling flat. Consumers were confused. What did Apple even stand for anymore? The company was having an identity crisis, and morale was hitting rock bottom. Executives argued over budgets, over priorities, over which products deserved to live or die. The board demanded immediate solutions, but no one had a clear plan. The stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, on the sidelines, Steve Jobs was watching. He was quietly consulting with old allies and former colleagues. He understood the chaos better than anyone. He had seen Apple's brilliance up close, and he just knew, that it was still possible to bring the brand back from the dead. Jobs had been quietly cultivating a relationship with a smaller company, a company that had developed revolutionary software for personal computers. It was a long shot, and most people dismissed the idea as far too risky. The software was innovative, sure, but it was completely untested at a large scale. The financial investment required was enormous. If it failed, it wouldn't just be a setback, it could be the final nail in Apple's coffin. But the potential upside was just as staggering. This software could completely redefine personal computing. Jobs believed that the only way forward was boldness, not caution. Back in Cupertino, the executives were torn. Should they listen to Jobs? Many were terrified that bringing him back would destabilize the company even more. The board was hesitant, cautious, scarred by past mistakes. But Jobs' reputation for genius and creativity lingered like a shadow over every single discussion. Some argued for investing in their own internal projects instead. Others pushed for partnerships with bigger, more established firms. Every option was scrutinized, debated, and analyzed to death. But the indecision itself was becoming a poison, paralyzing the company. Apple was at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of oblivion. Time was running out. Then, in January 1997, the moment arrived. It came quietly, almost without notice. A meeting was called to finalize the next strategic move. Jobs arrived, calm but with an unmistakable command of the room. He laid out his proposal. Apple would invest heavily in the untested software and acquire the smaller company that made it. It would mean reallocating huge amounts of money, killing other projects, and risking what little investor confidence they had left. The room went silent. Every single person there understood the weight of this decision. One signature on a contract would set off a chain of events that would either save Apple or destroy it forever. The tension was unbearable. While the suits debated, engineers and designers were working tirelessly behind the scenes. They were building prototype after prototype, with failures piling up in stacks. Jobs hammered home one word: focus. The company could only succeed if it concentrated all its energy on this new software integration and the product design that would showcase it. Small teams collaborated around the clock, rewriting code, refining the user interface, and perfecting the harmony between hardware and software. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of fear, determination, and raw anticipation. By mid-1997, the deal was done. The partnership and software integration had begun. Apple's engineers were pushed to their absolute limits. The first beta tests showed promise, but they also revealed countless bugs and problems. Jobs was relentless. He insisted on perfection, driving his teams through sleepless nights. Board members watched anxiously, terrified of a public failure. But inside the company, something was changing. For the first time in years, the energy was real. Employees believed in the vision again. Apple finally had a coherent strategy, a single, unified direction. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the momentum started to shift. Customers began to notice subtle changes. The products felt a little better, a little more intuitive. Confidence began to creep back. Marketing campaigns were planned with a new level of precision. Jobs insisted that they tell a story. Apple was no longer a company in crisis. It was a brand with a vision, a brand driven by innovation. The ads highlighted simplicity, elegance, and power. And the public started to respond. Cautiously at first, and then with genuine enthusiasm. Sales figures gradually started to climb. Tech journalists, who had been writing Apple's obituary for years, started to take notice. Analysts began revising their forecasts. The brand was being reborn, all fueled by one audacious decision that had seemed so crazy just months before. The narrative was shifting from failure to possibility. By the end of 1997, Apple had stabilized financially. But the full impact of that moment, that single decision, was still unfolding. The new software and hardware integration was proving to be revolutionary. Users loved it, and the market was buzzing. Jobs' vision of a sleek, user-friendly ecosystem was finally taking shape. The very same executives who had doubted him were now rallying behind the new strategy. The risk had paid off, but only because every small step that followed was executed with discipline and focus. The company's culture transformed. It became one of resilience, of creativity, of learning from the past. The disastrous mistakes of the 90s were not to be repeated. The tech world watched in amazement as Apple began to innovate at a pace no one thought possible. Designers and engineers were encouraged to push boundaries. Hardware, software, and retail strategies all aligned in a way that left the industry stunned. Jobs' intuition had been proven right. One bold decision could completely redirect the trajectory of a global company. Competitors scrambled to respond. Investors regained their trust. The media narrative shifted from skepticism to fascination. The Apple brand once again became synonymous with innovation, design, and courage. And all of it, was set into motion by that one choice back in early 1997. Consumers started to experience the new products. iMacs, new software, and eventually, iPods captured the imagination of millions. Apple stores became destinations. And brand loyalty soared. For the first time in a long, long time, Apple wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Looking back, that moment zero is crystal clear. It was the instant the executives signed the agreement to buy that small software company and bet the farm on its untested product. That one signature, that one choice of risk over caution, redirected billions of dollars, countless hours of work, and ultimately, the entire future of the company. Without it, Apple might have just faded away, another forgotten pioneer of the tech world. With it, Apple became a global powerhouse. By 1998, when the iMac launched to thunderous applause, Apple's story had changed forever. It was no longer a cautionary tale. It was a case study in audacity and vision. And it all goes back to that one pivotal moment when the company stared into the abyss and chose to leap. But this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of that single decision were just starting to be felt, and they would go on to shape not just a company, but the world we live in today.